Wait, you're saying he commercialized on that? What were you saying?
That's part of the dialogue in This is Phase III. Spider says it's going to turn into another Haight-Ashbury. Remember how we commercialized on that scene?
Well, you're saying, remember, you're quoting how we commercialize. Right. Now, how does that relate to this?
Well, Put a Mode in Yourself, the song is...
From the Tetrad manager's point of view, you were going to create a youth culture scene that you're going to make a lot of money from, on the executive level of Warner Brothers.
Yeah, exactly. And it shows
he's showing how the executives are thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
The groundwork, the hidden ground of the whole youth culture, which is what he was basically. The Evergreens said that. I asked him if he'd make a good president, and they didn't say no. They just said he would be a great local city councilor, like
mayor or something.
Yeah, mayor in a local. He'd be great on more of a local level, and that's interesting because. Well, there's all kinds of reasons why they would say that, but it's appropriate. And Zappa, there was about 1970, I guess he released this picture, who knows, he's standing up and speaking in a little school, like a classroom, like he's a high school teacher or brought into school. I don't know if it doesn't show the kids. You just get the sense that he's in a school class, telling kids stuff. And he really was... a guy who was trying to come around to the high school and tell people, get ready, get ready, and what you're going to do when you leave school. You don't know what's going to happen to you. You don't know the forces involved. He actually was doing local stuff like that. He was a local leader, politically. And why did I bring that up? What did you say? You were saying?
It's how a Tetrad manager was looking upon the commercialization.
I wanted to say that he was a high school teacher kind of guy who came in and pointed to the larger dynamics in society. Like in this LA Free Press interview he did in August 1969, he says, the editor of the creator of the LA Free Press, I think his name is Art Kunkin, is interviewing him, and the counterculture is looking to someone to give him a clue because it's going to be right around the time of the Manson murders, which was the first week of August 1969. There was a couple other things that happened. The moonshot had gone up, and Woodstock might have just about to happen. So Zappa says, forget about what I'm doing or anybody in cities. He said, I read about some kids in a small town, they took over something or did something. A little small, obscure scene. He says, that's where the real action is. What people are doing out there that is not covered and local scenes are happening. It's not what us assholes in the city are doing or in the media. So he was like trying to recover human scale. And
that's what the TV show The Wire does.
Yeah. So he... See, McLuhan was going around telling the corporate executives what they were doing wrong. There's no way Zappa could talk in that level and get their attention. So he was one slot down talking to his generation and coming in high school. And it's so appropriate when Evergreen said that. They said he'd make a good local city councilor or whatever they call him here. That was pretty perceptive because Zappa would not be able to sit around and do the formalities that a president has to do every day.
No way. Yeah, no way.
Yeah, and when he ran for president, he wasn't even going to campaign. He was just going to do TV interviews from his home. Strictly low budget, just make himself available to talk to everybody. Which then minds what McLuhan said years before. He said, you could run an election now from a television studio. You don't have to do all this running around on the buskings, Just do it from a television studio. So Zappa kind of intuited that. So Scott, say some stuff.
I like this introduction here for this the album that was released called Mofo Project Object. And then the opening part of the liner notes says, Frank Zappa is the leader and musical director of the Mothers of Invention. His performances in person with the group are rare. His personality is so repellent that it's best that he stay away for the sake of impressionable young minds who might not be prepared to cope with him. He does show up. When he does show up, he performs on the guitar, sometimes sings, sometimes talks to the audience, sometimes there's trouble.
Now, you know where that's from, Scott?
What?
That is on the first album, Freakout.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, and you're saying...
This thing called the MoFo Project Object is some kind of a collection of freak-out music. It's a double album. I'm not sure exactly what its relationship is to Freak Out, but it's some kind of a re-release of Freak Out with new liner notes and extra added pieces or music or something.
But is this a Zappa state release?
Yeah.
Oh, well, where are you getting these album covers or the stuff?
Well, I have it. I bought this when I saw Dweezil here in Portland on Frank's birthday a few years ago.
So you didn't have Freak Out and Absolutely Free?
No.
Oh, okay. No. So that was the great statement on the back of the Freak Out album. It was beautiful. He really created mystique for himself. He shows up sometimes. He plays this, does that. He's like a Charles Manson, in a sense of a mysterious cult leader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just thought that it was funny to read that in relation to you talking about him going out into schools to talk, to actually try to make a difference in young people's lives, and yet he's got this alter image of him, which is like keep the young and impressionable kids away from him because he's he's trouble.
Sometimes there's trouble. Now, okay, if you go into the interview we do with Zappa after he's dead, with the Evergreens, I bring up the root of the conceptual continuity. I had a theory. When he was busted by the cops in spring of '65, how that happened was that what apparently were some businessmen came to him because he had his studio and he was known to make weird audio. Somebody came and said, I want a porno tape. Do you know this story, guys?
Oh, I've heard it, yeah.
Yeah.
You know it, Chad?
Yeah.
Well, I'll just run through it quickly.
Yeah, I think it was in the biography, I think.
Yeah, They said, we want a sex tape for our stag party or men's party or something. So he got his girlfriend to bounce on the bed springs, to make noises. So he made the tape, and then when the guy came to get the tape, it turned out he was a detective. So Frank gets busted, and now, I forgot the phase before that. Before that guy came, there was interest in the local police force. Frank interfaced with them somehow, and he thought that they should know that there's a growing freak culture, and he thought the cops should understand these different kinds of people. So he volunteered to make a little movie or something about the weirdos, and they accepted that project, and he was working on it, but then the detective comes in and distracts him from that to make this sex tape. And then he gets busted for it. So in retrospect, he was set up. They got him thinking about one project, and then that made him vulnerable to the sideswipe, that another thing would come in. So, which is a perfect, police operation. So he got framed by the idea of making, helping the policemen understand freaks that Frank thought he'd bring to them. So, he's the local high school teacher coming to help the police for better community relations. You take that thing, that event, I then said to Evergreen, so Frank took that whole situation, and when he put the album out, he was replaying that. Here are the freaks. He was now speaking to the American culture. What his original project was, it's confined locally to the police department. And it's the same project. He's now saying, here's some freaky people that are going to be more and more on your scene. You might want to understand them a bit so that community peace continues. And I said, that is the original work. And that's the original concept of continuity, because he's going to do Freak Out, and he's going to do it on a big level, and he knows there could be consequences. He could be set up, he could be undermined, like the first project was. He knew there'd be weird effects, and Frank or the Evergreens said, "Yep, that's pretty good. That's the beginning metaphor." And that's what it is. It has this guy coming around. He'll come around and talk to the people, warn them this and that. It's satirical in the Susie Cream Cheese letter.
Yeah, it's like this sense of community he has.
Yeah, he's like a high school nerd, the class principal. I mean, the student president. He actually has a genuine feeling. He's smart enough to say, "Hey, we're a community. Let's try to make something happen here and provide leadership." He wants to provide leadership.
Yeah.
He thinks he's qualified, and he's pissed off at the incompetent leaders around him.
Here's a Frank quote in relation to freak out and what you're talking about. "We are systematically trying to do away with the creative roadblocks that our helpful American education system has installed to make sure nothing creative leaks through to mass audiences. We represent the only true patriotism left."
Where's that statement from? I'm not sure if I've seen that before.
That's part of the liner notes of the MoFo project object.
Oh, you know what? That they may be including United Mutations materials that you would get when you send away. You know what I mean? That was his.
Oh, that could be.
Yeah, and I never got in. And
check this out. This is worth reading. Frank Zappa was, from the ground up and the stars down, a composer. During his time here, he carried on alarmingly with bits and pieces of music called objects. Some were numbered, some were written out with attendant scores and parts. Some were played out by Frank or members of his various rock and teenage combos. Most are likely recognizable to hardcore listeners, but not all objects are groups of notes or even groups. The idea of objects extends all the way down to every nook and cranny of his life and what he did for a living, which includes but does not of necessity refer to jobs in any conventional or non-conscious sense. They appear as if random throughout the length and breadth of what Frank Zappa unilaterally denoted as project object. In his autobiography, The Real Frank Zappa, he described this as the overall concept of my work in various mediums. Each project in whatever realm or interview connected to it is part of a larger object from which there is no technical name. This project object, MoFo, is homeomorphic to the man and to the prime sine qua non of his arcana, freakout.
That's very good. I'm just out in the garage looking at the puny library I brought from Connecticut, and I don't seem to have the Zappa, the Wally book. I'd love to have that because there's some good quotes. But that's a good quote. Could you read that smoother? I don't remember that.
Yeah.
This is not a quote by him. This is someone explaining Zappa, right?
Well, yeah, and then they end with a quote from him. Well, no, yeah, I guess this is someone explaining Zappa.
Well, what's the quote from him?
I think it's each project in whatever realm or interview connected to it is part of a larger object for which there is no technical name. This project object, MoFo, is homeomorphic to the man and to the prime sine qua non of his arcana, freakout. No,
that's not him.
That's somebody else talking about him. But
yeah,
the thing that was interesting to me was that about this is he was on to the notion of, in programming. When he did Freakout, I don't know if they were doing... Chad, do you think they were doing object-oriented programming when Freakout was released?
What year was that? 68?
Yeah.
66.
Oh, 66?
Yeah, so what are you saying? Are you quoting a TV industry term, Scott?
No. Object programming is a programming method that I think probably didn't start becoming well used probably until the 80s or 90s.
By who? Give us some context.
By computer programmers.
Oh, okay. So you're talking...
And yet Frank is talking about how he was creating objects, which that were like modular objects that could be assembled or reassembled in the same way that a computer programmer does that with computer code.
No, that fits, and he may have been aware or not aware of computer talk in the Scientific Americans of the 70s or something, but I mean, he was aware of avant-garde movements in art, at least who he encountered. He probably didn't search him out, but he knew Pauline Oliveira's work, and that was pretty avant-garde. So, project object, probably that term could show up in some artist's work in New York around that time too. So I'm not sure it was just people thinking the same thing, but you're saying that's computer talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically it's the abstraction of computer programming languages into two basic components. And one is objects and the other one is events.
Right.
So basically everything that happens in the context of a computer program can be described through either an object form or an event form, and that's all you need to build a computer program.
Okay, so where would you read that?
I just found something in Wikipedia. Object-oriented programming has its roots that can be traced to the 1960s. Now, that would not have been generally well known back then. So but Frank was picking up on the meme of object-oriented programming.
He could have. Yeah. It's as simple as he had a fan who was a smart computer programmer who came over to visit him and said the words to him. It can happen that way.
Yeah.
And he picked it up just by somebody he met, because he is meeting all kinds of interesting people just by being who he is. So that's interesting. So that is actual computer talk. That's the beginning of Android Meme. You see, everything sort of collapses in 69, 70, and then it goes into what's called the bland out 70s by Lester Bangs. The point is you're really starting to get into the instant replay and the over-mediated society of the 70s. And that's the beginning or the starting the intensity of the Android meme. He's aware he's moving to virtual reality, and so he states in that thing I read you the chemical body's response to the virtual reality and what his new program is. I mean, if you put a little thing, a wink, an eyebrow thing in a trillion pins, you can retrieve that with digital technology.
But also, if you're about to embark on a giant environmental programming operation, it helps putting it into abstract forms like objects and events creates a center point that you can actually work with. It's like having stuff, just a generic kind of stuff, in quotes, that you can mold. Brings order to it.
Yeah, and it's also symptomatic of the effect of the satellite, which ran the 60s. By 70, 71, the generations younger than McLuhan, or the generation, are beginning to pick it up, and that brings in concept art and earthwork art. And I think in the other description somewhere, he says it's like an earthwork. So he's aware of artists in the late 60s going out into the environments and making big things out in the desert or lakes in Utah or something. You know some of that stuff, earthworks?
Yeah, it's interesting, Chad, what you were just saying about events and objects in relation to object-oriented programming. Because an event would be like clicking a link with your mouse, which would then evoke objects, which would then be bits of code that would be run in relation to that event which triggered the object. Does that sound fair to you, Chad?
Oh, it's very accurate. Most of the web applications that you use during the day are they're based on an event-driven model, and the events are changing the state of objects.
Yeah.
Or they're triggering other events.
I wonder if there's a metaphor that could be drawn here between, Frank creating events that would then generate new objects or something like that.
And that might get into xenochrony. That gets into xenochrony.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what I'm seeing now, I'm glad Scott brought that up, because that's when I heard was it object and event, the first thing that popped into my mind, having programming experience, was object-oriented programming. So I'm glad Scott brought it up. But like I said, if someone was about to embark on this kind of programming on such a mass level, it really would help to adapt the most leading edge form of programming that had been discussed at that time. And like in the 60s, you would have had like computer scientists at MIT would have been starting to buzz about object-oriented programming because it was a major, major paradigm shift. And it helped accelerate the growth of the Android meme because relying on the old procedural forms was less efficient. So you increase the speed of development by orders of magnitude, which allows for a faster evolution.
What a programmer does is he ends up teams of programmers end up developing libraries of objects, which can be evoked by a programmer. Wants to sit down, he wants to create a new program. All he has to do is think of what events he wants to evoke what objects, and he can link those events to objects that are in object libraries. So the objects pile up.
Every object has.
Go ahead.
Every object has responsibilities and has collaborators, and you could look at little subgroups within even the United Mutations. You know what I mean? You could have set that up to have these different sort of modules that interact with each other that way, or he could even apply it to the arrangement of musicians on stage and the way that they work in clusters.
And the way he conducted them with prearranged end signals.
Yep, and the way that he conducts them is akin to the way that like the lead engineer on a software project would conduct all the other teams of engineers, where so much so that one department of an engineering team might not even know what software they're working on because they're only seeing part of it.
That's right. It's also how the director of flight, at the NASA would do. He'd be signaling different things as they launched, different groups of engineers. Yeah, see, that's what.
So it's a very practical. It's a very practical form to consider this object and event model.
Yeah. Now McLuhan would say that this was the two-bit wit use of computers. He said, we had this amazing technology, but the literate establishment projected rearview mirror goals for the computer, like for accounting or speeded up categorization. And so McLuhan does in Cliched Archetype a whole expose of the word object and how just as dreams were the rearview mirror for Freud, objects became the rearview mirror for creative development, art world, and all that. And he said that's because we move into a new environment, which was flux and had non-objects, which was hard for people to deal with. So they archetypalized the object. And you have these computer guys thinking of a liquid, fluid environment of programming as object and event. Even object is figure, event is ground. To say something's figure ground is an I way of looking at things, an I by. You're fragmenting. Whereas McLuhan said in actual electronic interaction, there is no figure and no ground. They're interchangeable. So I'm just taking the language of it is rearview mirror.
Yeah. In the tetrad, the events would be the flipping, obsolescing, retrieving.
Yeah, the process.
But what are they flipping, obsolescing, and retrieving? They're cliche objects.
Yeah. Cliches that become archetypes. But see, the tetrad shows the process of it. It's not, the objects that are retrieved, this and that. It's to show the process of enhancement, moving aside, finding something that was moved aside and forgotten, and then brought back, and then it flipping into a different design.
Do you think Frank understood the tetrad process or used it unconsciously as part of his work as a composer?
No, I never told him that stuff. That was the secret stuff.
Yeah, I'm just wondering.
If you look at it, you could square the project object and turn it into a tetrad if you squared project and object.
Yeah, if you square it.
Yeah, take project object, which is a dyad, and then square it, and you could end up with tetradic dynamic, right?
Well, you walked right into something I've just clarified or written down for public consumption, and let me just find the notes. Did it yesterday. Okay. McLuhan claimed in Playboy magazine, it came out in March '69, that Joyce and Pound and Eliot had established the identity of the creative process. So then you juxtapose that with McLuhan's statement that creativity is the biggest cliche of the 20th century, because so much change happened that there was so much breaking up of molds, thought molds, and people come up with new information and new patterns, all of that to feed the gaping maw of the radio, TV, and computer environment. So the creative process, this is what he meant in '54, that the identity of the mysterious creative process had been established. So he sees Joyce and them being forerunners of that. Then he sees Norbert Wiener and them kind of turning it into systems theory and the MIT thing. So then I have here, you know how Ion talks about you place something in our present was placed in the past from the future, right? So that your present was knowable. So I call that the past, present, future gaming by Ion, because there is no past, present, future if you literally take the idea there's no time. But in our perceptions of it, maybe that's the realm of timing, past, present, future. So I say Ion's past, present, future gaming. That's the headline. Now here's what it is. You take the Tetrad. For most people, if something is enhanced, it'll eventually reach a point where it's too much for them. All right? So here's the essential way people write thriller fiction, how society's organized, blah, 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 under the Tetrad. Enhancing becomes too much. So it starts to be a disservice, but one can't fall back on what you want it removed or obsolesced. So we come back. What's the motive for enhancing? People get bored. They get tired of a cliche environment. They want a new environment. So they create a new environment, and it obsolesces what you want it removed. But here's the problem. So as the enhancing becomes too much and it starts to be a disservice, but you can't fall back on what you want it removed or obsolesced. So you retrieve something else that might be closer to the enhanced, because you're going to balance off the exaggerated enhancing. You've got to fall back on something, and so you retrieve something else, not what was obsolesced. And then that process becomes extreme and flips into the opposite. That is the essential dynamic that's described in Finnegans Wake and by Ion. And so the ratio is enhance is to obsolete as retrieving is to reversal. That's what you meant by a project is to event as project is to event. Anyways, that's a very profound thing that I sort of wrote out as the first time I wrote it out that way. Think of it. You're on a drug. You're having a great trip, but then it becomes too much. And that can be a metaphor for just a society. They brought in the internet, and everything went wild, and everything got enhanced, and then now they're trying to police it, right?
Yeah.
Control it. And so they... What?
I wanted you to apply that Tetrad to Ion.
Right. So when the enhancement starts to become a disservice, in other words, starts to move into opposite characteristics, opposite enjoyments, it starts to flip. Because McLuhan says the Tetrad, all the aspects are happening at the same time. So you take anybody who's getting drunk and they get drunk and having a good time, then they start getting out of control. So they or someone else has got to retrieve something, but it can't be an obvious retrieval of what was obsolesced, because that insults the drunk. So you come up with something else.
So what happens when we enhance Ion and it becomes too much and has to flip into something?
Well, you end up over here talking about Zappa.
Well,
you go over to Dobbstown.
You take a break. You have a break and go to Dobbstown to.
We retrieve Dobbstown. Yeah. Which resonates with Ion. Now get this, you don't retrieve alt slack, you don't retrieve anything else, you retrieve Dobbstown, because Dobbstown is the closest that resonates with the present situation of Ion.
Exactly.
There's a dyadic relationship there. What about the other two components?
Well, remember, it's almost like this is an articulation of the systole diastole. Something's coming in, flowing in, and something's flowing out. All as the thing is pumping away the excitement, and if something's being enhanced, you have to drain off stuff That would be obsolesce some stuff. You got to retrieve some stuff from somewhere else to fill in the balance, the buffer of, hey, I don't want to be enhanced too much. I'm going to block and merge and fall back on something. And so let's say the automobile enhances mobility, obsolesces the horse and buggy, and retrieves. When pushed too far, you don't bring back the horse and buggy. You bring in something that's similar to the actual service of the car, so you bring back the knight in shining armor.
No, you don't. The knight in shining armor has to become transformed into something that progresses beyond. Every time you keep progressing, the knight in shining armor becomes something that's progressed forward beyond where you were. You don't retrieve the knight in shining armor.
Okay.
The car becomes the knight in shining, becomes the retrieval of the knight in shining armor, and then when we retrieve the car, it becomes something even more progressed beyond the car, maybe the airplane or the spaceship or the UFO or something.
No. Okay. That's what we mean. The knight in shining armor is retrieved by the car. The car is an enhancement. It's obsolescing something, the horse and buggy, and retrieving the sensibility of the knight in shining armor, and when it's pushed to extreme, it flips into either an airplane or a traffic jam. Either way, you lose your mobility. So it's now you see how people look at a car driver and they might think, oh, there's a knight in shining armor. That's a metaphor they project on the car. It's all happening at the same time. They don't know that they're retrieving. They don't think about they're retrieving that image from the past and project it on the present. It's a useful image. You don't retrieve the horse and buggy. You retrieve the image of the knight in shining armor. So I'll read it again. When enhancing becomes too much, when it starts to be a disservice, you have to fall back on a balancing, but you can't do it in what you obsolesce, so retrieve something else that might be closer to that has characteristics closer to the enhance. That tension, that movement to enhance, what is it people say? 1 step forward, 3 steps back.
Yeah.
You enhance, and then a lot of fucking fill-in happens and a lot of retrieval. I mean, you enhance a lot in the 60s, and then you retrieve the small town and Reaganism and neoconservatism.
Instead of the knight in shining armor.
Yeah, as a virtual landscape.
Yeah, that's the Android meme doing Tetrad management.
You don't truly return to the small town. You just
do you get that? That's the Android meme. Now you're ready to really get it. That's the Android meme taking over the Tetrad management in the late 60s, early 70s after Rye returned to essence. And it's a virtual play by the Android meme, so it's pentatic. It's that image of Cheap Thrills, you know, the nuts and bolts and bulging eye flesh monster you were talking about on that album cover.
Yeah.
It's a mixture.
So I'm beginning to, Frank, I guess we could call him a Renaissance man, but he was an artist, he was a businessman, he was a scientist, he was an engineer, and he probably was a Tetrad manager on all 5 levels of your chart.
Oh yeah, that's
an editor.
Every one of the holy, he's an editor. Every one of the holy offices cover all parts of the chart.
Yeah, they just have their weight distribution is a little different.
Yes.
Yeah.
What they appear to be on the figure level, on the object level, is Frank's a musician, Zappa and McLuhan's an author, and that ain't what they're talking about.
Yeah, well, that's what they do. That's what they do for a living or as a figure. Yeah.
One of the figures. They're always trying to do
something. Special area of expertise.
No, Scott. They're always using that to jump off to other things. McLuhan couldn't wait to stop writing the books about 1970 and said it, and he was looking for new media, and the best he could get was Woody Allen. He loved it. He wanted to do another movie right away. And he made a few movies around that time anyways. They know. It's the Evergreens Principle. We don't care what information, what medium you use. We're here to get you information, so we'll use any available medium. Because the society is winging it under tetradic Android meme conditions.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, these are people who, in my definition, came into their power because they could put on these different environments as clothing, whereas most of the rest of us, or at least I certainly speak for myself, feel as though I'm inside the environments and oftentimes at the effects of them. But I'm certainly not. I certainly don't feel myself wielding political power or business power or artistic power on any large scale.
You might need to came into their power. If they truly came into the power, I don't think they would have said a word.
Yeah, that's possible.
Okay, so it's interesting what McLuhan said. He realized, way back there in the 40s or 30s, that all art was personal experience. So what you find is Zappa, LaRouche, McLuhan, all these people, their experiences, luckily or not, led them to these awarenesses. Zappa being an outsider in high school, okay, that's going to make him look at other stuff. And he also is attracted to underground R&B and black music, okay, it makes him a bit different. He thinks Elvis is silly. That's a rare teenager who thinks Elvis is silly, right? Like Elvis is a plastic, McDonald's thing. And all his fucking friends are going nuts. It's such a revolution to them. So then he gets into advertising. He gets busted. He sees what that shows him. And the main thing is that he doesn't know, really, you're going to move into a super entertainment-oriented state, in the 70s, 80s, and he's in the lowly position of being a lounge musician in the late 50s, early 60s, a nowhere place. And yet that's going to be where most Americans are living in nightclubs and clubs, drinking their asses off and getting entertained in the 70s and 80s. He is in an environment that he gets to see how Americans are at night. I think David Wally makes this point in his book. But he just was in the right, and then he's an advertising agency. What human being of his generation was into black music, this is all natural, was an outsider, as he says in the interview, Bob Marshall interview, has a girlfriend that the parents take away from him, so he becomes aware of the racism of his society. And then he's part of the civil rights scene, having black guys in his band in the early civil rights 50s civil rights movement. And then he's an advertising agency, and then he's got an amazing best recording studio in the country almost with Paul Buff Studio, and then he's busted. And he's actually approached to do stuff, and then he's busted. And then he also is in the right place to meet all the record industry people and then meet Lenny Bruce and Lord Buckley. I mean, it's just incredible Forrest Gump kind of situation.
Well, I can answer that in one word. Baltimore.
No, he always said that he would not have had the experiences he got and the opportunities if he stayed in Baltimore. It's because he went to California when he was like 10, 11, 12. I mean, nobody knows in the 50s in California.
If you could survive Baltimore.
No.
Especially if you were born into a poor section.
What?
Yeah, the mayor of Baltimore. The mayor of Baltimore. He wouldn't even be a musician if he stayed in Baltimore. You have to realize, when he goes to California, he's experienced a culture that's going to be the role model in the Android meme of a leisure society. There is the famous book that Mae Brussel pointed out. They ran all the police state exercises in the Reagan era in the 60s to get ready for the turbulent, unforeseen chaos of the 70s and 80s. So in California, he meets everything there. You don't meet that in Baltimore. Not what he did. So he was totally lucky that his father was a nomadic guy who wanted to go somewhere else. You see that's him. Look at McLuhan. He gets to go into Cambridge. Oh, and he wasn't really, almost not qualified. He hadn't got the proper marks, really, but he managed to pull it off. But
it's amazing to me that these guys all have something in common, which is this Tetrad management ability, and yet each one of them, they're like oil and water. They could never, sit down and become friends or hang out or appreciate one another's disciplines.
Hey, Scott, what did they have in common? They were tuned into the present. Their life experience allowed them to see the present. And they all saw the present differently, but they saw the present.
Yeah, but how they responded to it,
it's
so
different.
Unique.
Yep. And if you see the present, you're going to have a common view, a common aspect to them. I tried to bring up the diary, but fivebody.com, the server that's on, is going through end of the year upgrading and that, so the links are all fucked up. in the past couple of weeks. They're not there for a while, so unless there's some other place it is.
What are you looking for?
The June 18th, 1967 diary, party at Stanley.
Your AMX entries are all still there. And
where? Oh,
linked.
At Dobbstown? No, what do you mean they're just not linked? That means you can't get them.
From normal they're on five-bodied. I can send you the link.
Oh, yeah, send me the link then. You mean you can through five-bodied you get it, not Dobbstown you can't get it. But that's because the
links are broken.
Yeah, and Dobbstown probably is a different circuit and it's being more affected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Bob, do a tetrad on the Revelations.
I'd have to shoot you after I did it.
No, come on.
No, there's top security information in there, or whatever the phrase is.
I'm asking you to tell me what your top security information is. Just do a tetrad on it. That's all.
Okay. What is it? A simple one. It enhances dread, obsolesces comfort, retrieves the Babylonian captivity, and flips into end of the world.
Oh my God! And you're selling this for how much?
No, that's not what we don't say that. That's the cliche version of the Book of Revelations.
Oh, okay.
There's a bit of an issue because Bob's is a central character potentially.
Well, that leaked out on last week's cash flow.
It's right. We planned it that way. We what is it? Government by news leak is McLuhan's line. Government by news leak. Yeah, we leak up stuff carefully. Now James here, well, he missed last week, and it was lucky he missed it. But here's Revelation enhances Bob, obsolesces everybody, retrieves Dobbstown, and flips into Carolyn. Thank God. Thank God. Okay, I'm looking. Did you send it to me? I'm going over to my mail.
Yeah. Yep.
And there it is. Are you with us still, Chad?
Yeah, I'm here listening.
Okay, so we go down to 1967. It's one of the longest entries. June 18th, 1967. This is the first part. I guess you can follow along, James, right? Anybody else got it? Anybody else want to see it?
What's the link?
Maybe I'll send it on to you guys.
Did you send it to all of us?
No, sorry, man. I just sent it to Bob. I'll pass it on now.
See, we're leaving Frank and going to the hidden ground of Frank me. It's still relevant, Zappa fans.
Yeah, let's go back and reference that. You said that on the timeline it talks about the meeting when you got everybody together. We should go back and reference that.
Well, that's what we're doing.
Oh, good. Okay.
That's why you're being sent the link. But we'll wait till Chad comes back. What do I want to say? I should go on. What?
I am here.
Oh, who blinked out? James?
Nobody. We're all here.
No, there was a blink. James is not here.
James, you're here. Oh, okay. I missed
Case closed. he ain't here. I had full confidence on that bet. Okay, so I'm thinking of going on alt. I've lost my linking into alt fan, Frank Zappa fan, whatever it is, the group thing. I'm thinking of going over and posting the Buzz Coastin videos over there and links to our dialogues and put them on the alt Frank Zappa. Maybe somebody will clue into it, because we're talking the first time Zappa has been talked about intelligently.
Yeah.
We're as equally incomprehensible as Frank, and that's how you begin. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I got the diaries here. What's the date again?
June 18th, 67. Just as a joke, let's do let's do June 4th and 5th just to fill in time. It's pretty neat. Are you guys looking at June 4th, 6th, 7th in Dartmouth?
Yep. I'm waiting for the link.
Oh,
here it is. I got it. I got to cut and paste it, though. It didn't come in. Ding.
Okay, so everybody's got it? You got the diaries, James?
I got it up.
Okay, go to June 4th. I just want to give you a little preamble. It's pretty cute. Randy is an interesting kid in Dartmouth, and I'm interacting with him and a bunch of other kids. And June 4th, 6th, 7th, this is the week that the 6 Days War happens. It's a paranoid time, the Arab-Israeli War.
Yeah.
Mm. And, the whole nightmare of the Middle East exploding happens on this week, first week of June. So are you guys ready?
Yep.
You see it? I'm going to read it. June 4th, 6th, 7th in Dartmouth. Randy returned to the kitchen with the day's mail. He thought, what's this, a letter for me? He opened the envelope. Out fell a booklet of tickets. Picking it up, he saw it was for a lottery on the island of Malta in the Mediterranean Sea. Who sent me these? These actually should be in thought form. This particular copy does not have them italicized. So these are his thinkings. Who sent me these? They'd be italicized if it was done properly. It would take Randy several days before he would decide to take a chance on the lottery, but he kept wondering how the Maltese got his name and address. Now that was a pretty interesting mind control thing that was being set up around Randy, but let's see what happens on June 5th. Randy comes to me. He says, Bob, I got a strange letter yesterday. I was wondering if you could help me. Sure, what's strange about it? It came from Malta, offering me lottery tickets. I don't know anybody in Malta. How'd they get my name and address? Didn't you once, now, I'm being pretty cagey here, right? So I'm going to fucking distract him, fuck with him. So I go, didn't you once tell me your father was an engineer? Yes, his company built the McDonald Bridge. Why? Somebody could have gotten your name from a biography of your father in a catalog or a professional engineers association. But then again, there is another association called the Knights of Malta. What are they? They're a military order pledged to defend the Vatican. I'm not a Catholic. Well, I suggest you send the tickets in and see what happens, since they sent you more than one. Perhaps the lottery's rigged and they want you to win. At this point in the conversation, Randy and Bob entered the front door of Dartmouth High School. Once inside, Randy said goodbye as he rushed off to study for his provincial examinations. Bob stood quietly in the hall for a while and watched Mr. Fanning, the principal of the school, efficiently carry out his duties. Then Bob left the building, crossed Victoria Road, passed by Bicentennial Junior High School, strolled on to the athletic grounds behind the school, sat down on the grass to watch the kids and their coaches, and waited for Garrett to come by on his regular route to the McDonald Bridge. That he would walk the McDonald Bridge every day. And here's what I think. I assume this headache I've had for the last 24 hours is caused by the present war in the Middle East. And so be it. Now there's your relax and allow right there. Right?
Then so be it.
Yeah. I knew why I had the headache. I was picking up on the tension in the Middle East, which doesn't really start till the next day, I think. And I go, then so be it. Okay, June 18. We survived the Armageddon of the Middle East. It only lasted 6 or 7 days. Okay, so there's McLuhan. June 18th, Mumble Marsh McLuhan. So, asked Lynn LaRouche. Paul McCartney's birthday, continued McLuhan. Yeah, then I say, added Dobbs. Yeah, the Beatles are going to have their first live satellite broadcast in a week from today, added Dobbs. Frank Zappa finished sucking on a cigarette, tapped it into the ashtray on the wobbly table, interjecting, it's also Sugarcane Harris's birthday today. For me, that's more significant. See, there's Frank, fuck the Beatles, right? He cites some obscure blues guy. Then Mae Brussels says, who's that guy over by the long bench? Mae Brussels asked Dobbs as she sat down with her drink. So I say, Garrett Dean, he's an old friend of mine from Nova Scotia. Quite an actor, did a lot of Broadway in the 40s and 50s. He's not working much now. The last thing he did was interview the woman who played Hazel on TV. That was a woman named Shirley Booth, but that's a side thing by me now. I'll introduce you, Garrett, later, but he's leaving New York soon. He's moving back to his parents' home in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia in a couple of days. He doesn't like what Nelson Rockefeller has done to this city. They were all sitting around at Stanley's in East Village waiting for Jiddu Krishnamurti to come and meet them for the first time. Dylan's Like a Rolling Stone came on the jukebox, and LaRouche frowned and shook his head. LaRouche, these hedonistic concepts spell trouble for our culture, I guarantee you. McLuhan, well, Lyndon, the percepts are far more dangerous than any concepts. LaRouche, what are percepts? You mean our sensory life? McLuhan, yes, but I'm referring more to the new percepts. They're mechanical environmental extensions. Just then Dobbs stood up as he greeted a short Middle Eastern-looking man. Read that again. Just then Dobbs stood up as he greeted a short Middle Eastern man. Just then Dobbs stood up as he greeted a short Middle Eastern-looking man approaching the table. Bob introduced him as the next governor of West Virginia. That's when he was running for governor. Dr. Peter Beater. Zappa, the kids today are going to be different. They're going to allow things to happen, perhaps even have their cake and eat it too. McLuhan, but wait until they discover books. Zappa, when will that occur? McLuhan, when they get into the 30s and 40s. Dobbs, we and all our activities are drugs for the gaping maw. That's what I say. Connie walked over to Bob and whispered in his ear. He's on the phone again. I can't calm him down. Bob went into the back room, picked up the telephone, and put the well-known American businessman in his ear. Dobbs, Jim Garrison's getting close. You've got to go down there. This is around the Kennedy assassination, right? Dobbs, Jim Garrison's getting close. You've got to go down there. And this is around the time that Mae Brussel was going down there, too. I don't know if I knew then at that point. So then it says, Bob returned to the table and knows Zappa, with eyes akimbo, leafing through Connie's copy of Finning's Wake that had been left on the counter. Dobbs drew Frank's attention to the song on the radio right then, called I'm Sorry by the Impalas. Bob noticed Mark Lane. Now, he wrote one of the first expose books on the Warren Commission and the Kennedy assassination. Bob noticed Mark Lane passing on the street in front of Stanley's, probably heading home to his flat in Murray Gross's building. This is supposed to show you that I have him under surveillance, all right? That's what you're supposed to get from that. I know where he lives. Murray was a lawyer who worked in the DA's, and this is an actual person, Murray Grossman, who later was part of our Finney's Wake Society in the 90s. Murray was a lawyer who worked in the DA's office and had carved out an expertise in the new field of securities laundering by the mafia. He actually went on in the early 70s and testified in Congress on that. And he got so disgusted by the corruption he quit. Beater says, is this Krishnamurti fellow we're meeting a Buddhist or a Hindu? Mae Brussel, I've heard he's neither, a kind of mystical atheist. LaRouche, well, whatever, he's still a Gnostic. May, what do you think Jim Garrison's going to do next? Mae Brussel, I don't know, but I'm going down to New Orleans next week to help him. So there you have it.
Why does LaRouche think Krishnamurti's a Gnostic?
So LaRouche thought anything that wasn't Platonic, as Catholic, Christian, as an inferior culture. He did tolerate Sanskrit.
Would you categorize Krishnamurti as Gnostic, Bob?
No. But no, the next sentence is, he considered some early Sanskrit Vedanta documents. No, not Sanskrit, not Vedanta. Sanskrit documents were indicative of the good roots of the culture that became the Indo-Aryan. Is that what's called? Indo-Aryan, which was the roots of the West. So he says the Platonic tradition was way back there, and that's the stuff of India.
Sanskrit had its roots in some Sanskrit stuff.
Beg your pardon?
LaRouche is saying that the Platonic ideas had their roots in Sanskrit stuff.
Yep. But it becomes just that it's common sense, you know. I mean, remember, LaRouche did a book later called In Defense of Common Sense, and of course, none of it sounds like common sense when you read it. But he was there's a certain kind of brilliant common sense that serves every culture well, and if the culture does that, they will do better technologically and socially. And if you veer away from that constant, quote, truth or process of truth getting, you're doomed. Okay.
Yeah. What do you suppose Ion's perspective would be on what you just said?
He'd go, never mind, just Bob mouthing off, Bob's not knowing what he's talking about, blah, blah, usual critique.
Words.
What language. Mortar. He'd call it mortar, Scott. Mortar talk.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, let's see here. Let me see here. Okay. What did you think of this?
No, wait a minute. We're going to finish the meeting. That was just part one.
Okay, go ahead.
Now, I'm not going to read the whole incredible Krishnamurti talk, okay? That's too long. But I want to show you the reactions. So, the second entry for June 1867, which I think is the only time there's two entries on one date. Connie got Bob's attention and pointed to the doorway of the bar they were all sitting in, Stanley's in East Village. Bob jumped up from his seat and moved briskly toward the entrance with his hand out. So Connie points out that somebody's coming in the door. Dobbs says, Mr. Judo, I'm so happy you found our rendezvous. The elegant but serious face waited for Bob to direct him. Bob signaled to the bartender to turn the jukebox down as he escorted Krishnamurti to the long table of guests. Introductions were politely made, and then Bob asked Krishnamurti to address the room. So you have this long address, and then you have the reactions. With that said, let me just read the last paragraph of what Krishnamurti says. Follow this. First the object, then the desire, then the image, which creates the thought. Do you see? Don't answer the speaker. Go into it yourself. Observe it yourself now. Oh, why should I go on? Is anybody listening? The speaker says there's an experience beyond thought. And he's talking about himself. He's the speaker. It is not God. God is a concept created by thought. It is not an experience created by techniques of meditation, by chants or mantras, as they advocate in Eastern religions. Now, this is what I would agree with. It is not a product of prayer or aesthetic habits as taught in the Western religions. It is not any of that nonsense. The speaker is affirming a bliss that cannot be expressed in words, but the speaker is not asking you to believe him. The speaker may be crazy, but he's asserting there is a difference between the mind and the brain, and we will go into that tomorrow. Which meeting never happened. We never did have the tomorrow. With that said, Jiddu Krishnamurti stood up from the table, and Garrett Dean guided him out the door with the utmost sensitivity and flair, and you can just imagine how Garrett did that. He was very good. Garrett was the ultimate host. The respectful silence was broken by the voice of Herbert W. Armstrong. Now, this is the guy who starts the Fundamentalist Church, right? The Worldwide Church of God. He goes, I apologize, Bob, for arriving late and missing the first 5 minutes of Krishnamurti's speech, and that may be the reason I'm a little puzzled about the point he was making. For example, I certainly don't agree that God is a concept created by thought. God is not something created by human beings, but human beings were obviously created by God. I don't see why he brought God into a talk that was otherwise interesting in its psychological emphasis. May Brussels says, yes, his talk was fascinating as psychology. It was even bizarre. But he gave me nothing, at least so far, that helps me in my research into the Kennedy assassination, which I think is a prime cause of so many problems in our country today. As a matter of fact, if more people were influenced by Krishnamurti, I would consider him a dangerous distraction. But he's so out of touch with today's reality, he could never get that kind of attention. Tomorrow I will ask him if he will help my friends and me expose the Warren Commission's cover-up. Oh, that never happened. So Beater says, he says it right here. He was studying Hinduism up in Boston, some guru up there at the time. I personally found it a fascinating talk too. I've been studying Hinduism the last few years, and I can understand the religious dimensions of the psychological aspects in Krishnamurti's talk from the Hindu perspective. But curiously, he doesn't seem to have any respect for Hindu meditation rituals. As you suggested before you arrived, May, it seems accurate to call him a mystical atheist. LaRouche, to be blunt about it, I think he represents the worst aspects of Gnosticism. As an advocate of the Platonic dialectic, I am insulted and not surprised that he, in true Gnostic fashion, did not wait around for any questions. What are we supposed to do with a babbling, halting monologue? And then I say, I think Krishnamurti's going to take questions tomorrow, Lynn. LaRouche says, oh yes, when it suits him. Well, we'll see. I will admit he has a hypnotically seducing effect while he's talking. He's a good rhetorician, a skillful Aristotelian. That's the ultimate LaRouche put down, right?
Right.
You guys, right?
Okay, go ahead.
A skillful Aristotelian. Everybody there?
Yeah.
Yeah, McLuhan. I didn't want to talk over Scott's response.
Right.
That's the token LaRouche insult. That's
right.
Aristotelian.
Yeah. McLuhan says, but Mr. LaRouche, Gnostic techniques are a valid way to explore our sensory conditioning. Gnosticism should not be considered a way to salvation. However, as an art form, it attempts to replay the stages of apprehension, and therein we can use its modalities to a secular end. My recommendation to Krishnamurti would be in the form of a question. Isn't our bodily sensory conditioning puny compared to the collective numbness induced by our technological conditioning within these vast new environments we inhabit? How can we develop a language for awareness under today's electronic conditions? We may have to use the media's art forms to replay the stages of apprehension. Now, Zappa used the media's art forms. So Zappa says, about 10 years ago, I started reading up on Zen Buddhism, and that helped me to drop my Catholic conditioning. Krishnamurti sounds like Zen to me, and so I enjoyed his talk. Although speaking as a composer, I agree with Alan Watts' objections to John Cage's use of Zen Buddhist inspiration in his musical compositions. Music being a technological experience today, I would say Mr. McLuhan has a more accurate diagnosis of the problems confronting the modern-day composer who refuses to die. Wouldn't a society that needs all the friends it can get use a force as powerful as today's popular music? Now, you note that last line is what he actually ends his Life magazine article almost a year later. He ends, wouldn't a society that needs all the friends it can get use a force as powerful?
So, hey, Bob.
Yeah?
Just a question. So are you just basically paraphrasing these different people?
No, this actually happened. This is what they said.
It just, I don't know, it sounds really, I don't know, kind of silly that Zappa's speaking in these aphorisms that he's put in other places.
Well, that's the interesting thing.
It's totally ridiculous to Krishnamurti. What possible motive could Krishnamurti have to show up for this crew?
Because he was a close friend of my father's. Now, listen to this.
Dobbs. Yeah.
First of all, Krishnamurti showed up and talked everywhere. Okay? The second thing, he was a very close friend of my father, and my father told him to do it. Do me a favor. And remember, my father was fully aware of what I was organizing over here. You can see it in the quotes back in '64. I can read you right after this. I take my father to a Zappa concert in London, and see my father's reaction to that. Anyways,
but the whole Theosophical Society was a ground you would have had to master to progress.
Well, what do you say? What's that got to do with Krishnamurti?
He came from the Theosophical Society, right?
He dropped it pretty quickly.
Yeah. But it's natural for you to, peruse through that and understand it.
You're saying it's natural for me to peruse it?
Well, yeah, to comprehend it and put it in your charts and,
Wait, come on now. What you're fucked up, man. What are you trying to say?
No, well, they were wondering why Krishnamurti would come and speak.
Who? You say they were wondering? No, Scott was wondering.
Scott was wondering, yeah.
Yeah.
So I was just saying, well, it makes sense that he was there,
No, it doesn't make sense if you quote the Theosophical. What's the Theosophical Society got to do with me?
Nothing.
Okay, so what you're saying there's something about a Theosophy that explains why Krishnamurti would show up.
Have you spent any time ever listening to Krishnamurti speak?
Yeah.
Okay, James, what is it about Theosophy?
James, what do you think Krishnamurti's motivation would be to travel halfway or to travel across the country?
He wasn't traveling. He lived in New York and spoke there a lot. This is local for him.
Oh.
No, he had a place in New York
City.
On
local, Bob, wasn't Krishnamurti on some local New York TV channel then or something?
30 years later,
oh, okay.
They played videos on Manhattan Network Cable. 30 in the late 90s, and that was the first time I got to look at Krishnamurti. I watched it every Tuesday. Bob Marshall watched it with me a couple times when he visited, and you could watch the camera come up real close to him and examine him. And all the people in the audience are being interrupted by who they're sitting beside. They can't hear Krishnamurti. You never heard Krishnamurti so well than if you sat there and watched a video of him, because they really came in and close, and you watched his face. It was incredible. I really figured out Krishnamurti because of those 2 years I watched him on Manhattan Cable in the late 90s.
Yeah, but Krishnamurti was not interested or tangled up in politics,
right,
or CIA stuff, or game playing on any level. So it's hard to imagine him showing up at for an event such as what you were hosting. I mean,
he did not know. Look, he did not know who would be here. He never even found out who they were. He left. Look, he's only there because of the influence my father had on him.
Well, and what was that?
They were ancient friends. And in that sense, now see, this is where James could maybe get it if he fucking pursued it. So what's your connection with Theosophy and me in this event? What's your point, James?
Well, I thought that you would look upon as the whole theosophical movement as a ground worth studying and researching.
As a ground worth studying?
Oh, worth including in
now, why would I be interested in them? Why would I be interested in...
Well, Krishnamurti was groomed as a world leader.
Yeah, and what's that got to do with me and Theosophy or this event?
Nothing, it's just...
Nothing? Well, then why'd you bring it up?
No, I'll tell you something, Bob. David Worcester one time told me something to the effect that a relative of his, a father or grandfather type person in his family, or an immediate family member, had something to do with, was involved with the Ledbetter and the people who brought Krishnamurti over. But I don't know if that...
No, that's Bob Carr, Bob and Connie Carr. The thing, Dave's, we did that in a recent taped conversation between JW and Ion and Dave Worcester, and he went into his whole family. His father was a Kansas minister and knew the Eisenhower family. But anyways, Bob Carr is the one involved with Krishnamurti.
Oh, okay.
Okay, back to your point. You're saying...
So you wouldn't call Krishnamurti a holy office?
He is a holy office. He's right there in the fucking chart.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He's there. That was my whole point.
Yeah, but it's not because he's a theosophist.
No, I know that. I was just introducing, that was interesting, and then he broke away from that quick smart.
Okay, wait. What was interesting? Finish your sentences.
Ledbetter, the whole theosophical movement, Madame Blavatsky, who wrote that.
You know why it was interesting?
Well, I probably had personal reasons, but what?
Well, that's what my father worked with the oligarchs, was an employee, and the oligarchs, a certain faction, propped up the Theosophical Society. That was the whole early attempt at world government.
Exactly. So that was where I thought the connection, was always going to be.
Well, you didn't say it. You didn't get nowhere near. I knew that maybe you might be going there, but I had to say it simply.
I assumed that the connection was made, but sorry. Okay.
Yeah, this is actually me setting up Krishnamurti. I wanted this to happen, and the point, I knew that each one of them would bring up aspects that Krishnamurti wasn't dealing with. And as I have in my McLuhan essay, Krishnamurti was superseded by McLuhan, because Krishnamurti was about verbal awareness and seeing through the hidden ground of speech, but he did not see what was happening with the Android meme. And every one of these guys is an aspect of looking at the Android meme, which Krishnamurti had no clue about. Mm-hmm. That was my agenda.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I would think if you could see through the hidden to the hidden ground of speech, that would universally also be the hidden ground of the Android meme, or even post-Android meme or post-information or whatever. Once you got down to that level of essence that transcends the phenomenal expression of the world, it would be the hidden ground of the Android meme as well.
You said the essence and transcendent; those words show an inadequate understanding of the issue here, and no, that would not help you. You have to all the history of art for the last 500 years. The history of art is ways of dealing with new industrial environments and how to do it beyond what the words can do. Now, Ion comes in with the word point, and that's been retrieved now for a healthy reason, but we're talking about the development of mass media mortar, and that is what freaked out John the Revelator, and is a key part in the book of Revelations. which James knows because he heard the theory.
He saw that coming 1,000 years and down the road or something?
Yes, he saw it 2,000 years before. Yep. That's what you learn. That's the key to everything is a revelation of awareness if you want to catch up on what your question and statement and complaint was leading to.
Well,
right, James?
Yeah.
You better say yeah.
You better say. No, Bob, this is why. All right, stand back and watch the miracle
the miracle work and miracle working powers by incompetent sentences.
Exactly, my stumbling short.
Yeah. Stand back and watch the
or something.
That's a good one. I'm going to do that on Ion and the cash flow. Stand back and watch the miracle working work of my stuttering.
Excellent.
Miracle working powers of my stuttering, Mrs. Ion.
Yeah, no, sorry, I must have skipped out of the flow before and mumbled my way.
Yeah, a little bit of war wound came back, old acid flashback.
Yeah. It's like, I knew what I was talking about, and I just assumed it was like, everyone knows what I'm thinking.
Your ESP overrode the words.
It was a good point when you got around to, recognizing that the rest of us didn't know what you were saying, and then you clarified it.
Yes.
But I operate from the recognition that all phenomena is illusion. And so once the non-phenomenal or non-physical is recognized as being the hidden ground, it's the hidden ground for language, speech. It's the hidden ground for all the extensions of language as well. So, and Krishnamurti knew that. So I don't.
No, it isn't. It isn't the hidden ground. It isn't the hidden ground. We're the hidden ground of the non-physical, according to Ion.
Well, it's a figure ground thing, and it flips.
Okay, so what did you say about James? You were glad that he recognized he wasn't communicating clearly?
Well, I'm glad you got him to stay with it until...
Right. We're glad that Bob recognized he wasn't speaking clearly.
Lemonade, Bob, lemonade.
That's AID, lemonade.
That's right.
Okay, so...
But no... Moving on, because this diary entry I've been reading.
Can I just ask how this ties into Civilization Phase III?
Yeah, we're coming to that. Let's continue with the quotes here. So we're at the point where Zappa says, I would say McLuhan is pretty appropriate. Now Zappa, he didn't know what he was saying, really. He didn't remember it, but he's a genius. He just realizes what's going on right then. Hey, McLuhan sounds like the most accurate here. You know what I mean? He'd never heard McLuhan before. And later he didn't know, he didn't think he understood McLuhan, but that's 25 years later. And he did read it's probably because of this. No, he says he read the McLuhan book on an airplane around 1967. It was probably because of this that he mentioned McLuhan or something, and someone gave him the book, or he saw it in a drugstore and bought it, because the paperback was quite available back then in stores. So anyways, he makes a pretty interesting statement here. Then I say, Garrett, you were so graceful okay, let's end with Zappa. Music being a technology experience today, which relates to what we're saying, right? What we're talking about. He knows what it is. I would say Mr. McLuhan has a more accurate diagnosis of the problems confronting the modern-day composer who refuses to die. You see, every one of them they knew they were among heavies pretty quickly, because I have a little excerpt, the first part, where they're talking among themselves. I mean, they had a chance to get to pick up something with each other. So they all then say their basic point, and they want to be impressive, right? So you get their basic ground here. They pull out all their ammunition in what they say. So he says, the modern-day composer who refused to die, but there's all these things confronting him. Wouldn't a society that needs all the friends it can get use a force as powerful as today's popular music? There he is questioning Top 40 radio and all that, and the whole cultural charisma of music. He's questioning it. Dobbs, Garrett, you were so graceful in escorting Krishnamurti out the door, I almost couldn't detect a twinkle of the insolent imp in your eye. Were you really so eager to get rid of him? Garrison. Oh, Bobby, 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 which you can hear on Furryland. He did that often, right? Bobby, Bobby, Bobby. You're the Rumpelstiltskin, not me. No, no, no. I feel truly blessed to hear such a river. It was the Buddhist laughter, and its chuckling slowly got louder and louder until I was crushed by the Niagara Falls of Krishnamurti's wisdom. I am amazed that I was able to regain enough consciousness to blurt out even this much bliss. That's Garrett. He has the best answer. And then I have, as everyone relaxed amid the laughter evoked by Garrett as he hung limply on his bar stool, Connie signaled the bartender to bring on some beverages to loosen the tongues and minds. But Bob whispered, hold the jukebox. I wasn't going to have any fucking music drown us out, whatever was going to happen. Not much happened after. We actually didn't know what to say to each other, and everybody left. But that was the beginning of, that was my army. There it was.
Yep.
They're all about to walk onto the world stage right at that point. So,
yeah, right.
you're saying, Chad, that I made up a bunch of cliches that they all would say.
That's the other side of it. But the first time I said it, what I meant was, it sounds like it just sounds silly that like Zappa would be speaking so aphoristically. Like in all the interviews I've seen with him, he doesn't seem to repeat certain aphorisms.
Okay. Yeah, you don't need to go any further. Zappa knew what to say in different situations. You didn't know the private Zappa. I mean, he's talking in interviews to little kids.
That's a good point.
You know, stupid fucking kids writing for Hit Parade, or maybe a guy a little older for Rolling Stone, but that's later.
Bob, you got to realize none of us really believe any of this, but but it's so much fun. We have to participate.
Well, that's great. No problem, as long as you're having a good time.
But anyway, what was the second thing you asked me, Bob? If I thought, well, yeah. So the other thing is that you did an inception here, and you embedded these aphorisms in these people. So this would be like the archetypal situation when they put those aphorisms out of their mouth, and then afterwards, like modern day composer who refuses to die would have been later outed into the media.
It would be later what?
Outed.
It actually was out. It was out a year before. This is a year after Freakout came out, and that statement is on Freakout and Absolutely Free. Absolutely Free comes out around this time. It's got 2 albums out with it. So it's part of his ammunition, public ammunition. It's very normal for him to say that.
It just seems really silly, though, for anybody to be so wooden and repeat the same aphorism that they put out on their album.
Well, you know, these are probably not the exact words. I mean, I didn't tape record them. This is what I remember approximately what they said. This is not the exact.
So you were paraphrasing.
And I was trying to be as exact as possible. I mean, I had a pretty good memory. I'd say it's 90% accurate. I mean, there could be, when you read it... So
you weren't paraphrasing, you were just as accurately as possible trying to retell what you heard.
Yes, and it would go like this. He would go, I would say McLuhan has a more accurate diagnosis of the problems confronting the modern-day composer who refuses to die. It never came out like that. He might go, I would say McLuhan, has a accurate diagnosis of the problems. It was haltingly come out, but when you read it, it's just speeded along. It's not natural. I mean, I could have put in the ahs and the ums, right? Fuck that.
Yeah. And you almost need to write it as a script, with all the little sort of mise en scene and what else is going on, to make it more real.
Yeah, I try to make it as real as possible from what I remembered, and also it's didactic. I'm trying to get the main points. This is where it's archetypal that they said, and luckily they did say their main points, and show the difference between them.
Yeah. No, I'm just asking you the question here for historical significance, Bob, just because I wondered whether or not you paraphrased what they had said or whether you were simply relying on the very best of your memory to accurately portray what was said.
Yeah, I was relying on my memory. And you see, my diary entries from way back in the 30s and 40s, they're just vague memories. I didn't write shit back then. I didn't think it was significant. But by the time I'm in mid-60s, I know what I'm doing is significant, and I start writing the diary. So this was written probably that day, right after it happened, when I had a chance. So I had it fresh in my mind. And it does look artificial, but if you knew what, it is the essence of what they say. You know, it's, and that's what they all, LaRouche has always just been pissed off about Gnosticism for 40 years. Zappa has been talking about the modern experiences that new inventions brought in as a problem for music. That's what he's always been about. Garrett fucking talked like that all the time in his little bit. Herbert Armstrong did his standard bit. They all had a basic point, but they were creative in presenting it differently in different media, in different contexts.
How come Thompson and Croker, who made your chart, didn't make this meeting?
Come on. Thompson would be... He actually he was at MIT, and his book his PhD on Dublin, on the Irish Rebellion or whatever, it came out around 67, and he writes later about New Year's Eve, 1967, he has his big vision and he decides to leave MIT. So he's at MIT, I don't know him, and he's 1938, he's only 29 years old.
I guess they weren't relevant in 1967 anyway.
No, they weren't. And Croker's just, what's Croker? He's 22 at that point. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're not, it goes in order. You got LaRouche, and then you got McLuhan, then you got Thompson, who comes after McLuhan, he was the McLuhan of the 70s, and then Croker is more like the late 80s. And then I'm now, or the last 15 years or something, you know, that it's span of decades. And I have...
you, Bob, out of all these characters here, LaRouche is still the only one alive.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, Beta was born in 1921. This actually is very close to his birthday.
LaRouche is 22, wasn't he?
Yeah. He's the same age as me, but Beta is he's around June 21st. So in 3 days is Beta's birthday. And he was born in 1921. McLuhan was 10 years earlier, 1911. May Brussel was 1922. Armstrong was 1893 or 2 or 94 or something like that. Krishnamurti was 1894. Mm-hmm. 1895.
So Bob, how did LaRouche get by without getting killed?
Exactly.
No, because he was protected by us. I mean, go back to, did you ever read the LaRouche part in 1966? How I set him up with the help of Licio Gelli? Did you see that? Go back to, here it is. Look at, here's how it began. May 22nd, 23rd, 1966, Rome and New York.
Yeah.
Can you, not so well known. What?
Yes, I've read that part before.
Yeah. See, look, Licio Gelli, he's a not-so-well-known European businessman. He tells me, we've got to get a hook into this student unrest that's increasing in the United States. Since their leanings are to the left, it has to be through the socialist parties. Look for someone with a grievance in there. Bob flew into New York, and soon after perusing the radical journals for a while, he got in touch with a writer calling himself Lynn Marcus. And you can read about this period in a whole new book, a very interesting book that's come out on LaRouche, written by one of the former LaRouches.
How has LaRouche been able to stay alive and handle the punishment of being so obsolete? Whereas the other guy
in politics.
I was just going to give you a secret. The guy who did this book is Kevin Coogan, who you don't get his real name when you do the book. But here's LaRouche. Mark Stallman tells the story. His wife, when he was in the LaRouche movement, she was in charge of the bank account for the LaRouche movement, and every now and then a mysterious $50,000 would come into the account, and she had no idea where it came from. Well, that was my network, and it came from the Vatican. So here's what I say. Is Lynn Marcus your real name? Lynn Marcus says, it's Lyndon Hermal LaRouche Jr. What's your complaint? Well, I'm a Platonist. I've made some discoveries to show that the real stream of Platonism is a story suppressed and untold. There is a technological basis for the conflict between Aristotelianism and the real Platonism. I think it was Coleridge who said men were either Aristotelians or Platonists. LaRouche says, yes, and the Romantics were certainly no help to my antecedents in that century, my allies being thinkers like Humboldt and Riemann. So what is your strategy? I'm going to offer a night class over at Columbia and create a cadre of students who could steer this revolution away from its present controllers who have a decidedly Aristotelian utopian bent. And then I say, I'm a revolutionary myself, and I have funds available for you if you can show me some results and get your plans into action. So that's that, and then the footnote says, the rest of the conversation was drowned out by Like a Rolling Stone as Bob and LaRouche left the restaurant on West 4th Street. So there it is, that's the beginning. And I'm working for Lisa Jelly, side operative in that.
Is LaRouche also Christian, or what's his religious affiliation?
He grew up as a Quaker.
Does he maintain a religious affiliation?
Nah, he's intellectual about it.
How does Plato relate to, say, the Christ image? Or
well, that's where you got to read LaRouche's very interesting writings. How Christ was a Platonist. The true Platonic tradition, which is a simple tradition. Don't accept what they say is happening, and keep looking around and be curious and try to make a better society through technology. That's the most crude way to state it. Don't believe what you see. It agrees with Ion. What you see is not real. That's a major Platonic situation. What you can see is real.
What you see is not real. In other words, don't trust your perceptions. Your five senses.
Yeah. Whereas McLuhan's an Aristotelian. So a Platonist says what you see is not real. What you can't see is real. And that's the archetypes. The archetypes in Plato's world were more real than this world. Now, LaRouche,
how does Ion deal with Plato?
I don't know. I haven't gone into that particular area. I don't think. If I did, I don't remember. I cover a lot of stuff. I mean, Ion is not impressed with anybody.
No, apparently not.
Yeah. Because, I mean, Ion would in certain ratios.
Would you say he's not impressed with you, Bob?
Well, he's definitely not impressed with me. I get insulted all the time.
Why does he show up and talk to you?
Well, I'm the best that the little men have to offer.
Doesn't that hurt your feelings, Bob? I mean, look at your timeline here, Bob. I mean, look at the significant work you've done on behalf of all of us in this world, and you think Ion doesn't think anything of you.
Well, it's not over yet. It's lots of time left to impress fucking Mr. Ion. He's putting his bets on me. You know, he's decided all we got is Bob and his little partner, Mrs. Dean.
Dr. Dean, Bob.
Oh yeah, Dr. Dean. Right, I forget. But what were you just saying? There was an important point. I was going to say that in certain ratios he'll praise people. You know, he'll say, "Well, Plato had this over his contemporaries." Blah blah blah. You know, it's in the world of form. It's all relative. It's all mortar. Ion is the expert on mortar. Can do anything in mortar better than Google or Internet or anybody. But he's pointing past it.
Does Ion help helping to grow the piano of the world of mortar?
No way.
Here we go.
No. Ion is a spiritual anarchist.
Okay, so that Ion doesn't fall into the same effect that we were talking about in the beginning of this exegesis regarding when you have a new hidden ground, you are working with when you're using the old hidden ground in the figure, like the piano or the pop culture environments, when it's in front of you, it grows because of the frustrated effect it has because it's been displaced. So by Ion, you being such a whiz, being better Google than Google is and all the other things, that's not having the same effects of expanding
No, it's the same effect. I mean, ion will correct the mortar world. The android meme in the mortar world is in hyper quark-tuned cubed reality, and ion is the only way to be in any environment to it, and it's going to dismantle the android.
Not also stimulating that environment?
Yes, yeah, no. Look, as Ion says to me occasionally, in the past year and a half, we've produced more content in the occult world or the seance world or whatever, this new age world, more content than anybody. In only a year and a half, we produce a lot of garbage, so to speak, a lot of mortar, cash flow, everything. So Ion's going to outdo the android meme, just like he outdid the Book of Revelations as known by doing it better. That's the thing. He takes on the past and does it better, but he's not limited to that agenda. There's an agenda past that. Because it's all ending with the thinning of the veil. So this is, at the very end, before the thinning of the veil, all of human-made knowledge shows up in the form of Ion, who can rapidly replay it as a rapid series of entertaining situations every week or every day in a reading.
He puts it all on. That's why you can't actually experience. That's why that aspect of Ion, which is speaking, is putting on human invention as clothing, but that's not non-physical. It's recycling he may be speeding up the cliché to archetype process, or
he is.
The cliché to archetype process is what shows up. That's not non-physical. So all that we can experience of Ion through our sensory perception and our percepts and our cognition and our thoughts is part of the physical experience. That's all that we can know about him, other than the fact we've taken on faith there's something called non-physical behind it all.
Hey, Scott, non-physical's not behind it all. Did you listen to Wednesday's show?
Yeah.
You know about me and Santa.
Yeah, what was that all about?
What was that all about? You wanted to know a couple weeks ago, who in the hell are you, Bob? Remember that? Who are you? Well, we got some fucking answers in the first 20 minutes of the show.
I know. 2 months ago, you were Osiris, and now you're Santa Claus.
What's the difference, as I always say? What's the difference? Osiris created a new civilization.
Yeah, I don't know that Santa Claus did.
Oh, yeah.
Santa Claus is traceable back to a particular type of red-capped mushroom, actually.
Yeah, that was an early present. That was an early gift. That was an early gift given to humans. But I wanted to say, I brought up that point because you were saying what? Just go back to what Ion is a hidden ground, and then you said... had some good thoughts there. What was the thought just before this?
I asked if the phenomenon that we discussed in the beginning of this whole thing tonight about the growing of the environment out of its frustration via its displacement is also at work with Ion stimulating the frustrated environment by outdoing it at its own game.
Yeah. But then Scott had a particular angle. If he said the words, I
don't know how to say it exactly, but all that can be experienced and perceived is phenomena, and that is the substance, and that's all that we can know of Ion through communication. We hear his words, or we get his attitude, or we get whatever. But as he comes through the different JWs, you get 5 different Ion JW combos. Non-physical is not expressible in phenomenal terms.
Oh, that's what I wanted to say. Yeah, you got it. Ion said for the first year or so publicly that the non-physical doesn't create, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. He's now announced lately, have you heard it, that non-physical can create because of the chip landscape, which has kind of gone around everything. Have you heard him say that?
Yeah, I know, but it just sounds like he's backpedaling. I mean, what has happened in the last 6 months? The non-physical couldn't create 6 months ago for all of eternity, and now all of a sudden it can, 6 months later.
That's the point. He had to tell you what was. And you didn't even know what was. That's revealing the mystery landscape. So he exposed the mystery landscape, told all the secret mystery, and you haven't heard much of it, but I have in 4,000 hours. He exposes everything in all kinds of traditions and history and science and politics and that. And that is just telling you the way it was. Now, Ion says that he can now create. Well, he actually showed his creation ability by showing up on March 18th with a media hound like me and knowing he'd be in the media. That's where he creates. He's actually gone into the media to create mortar and try to slice through it. That's the real hidden ground, figure ground situation, Chad, you got to look at.
Yeah. So,
mortar being the hidden ground of language?
No, mortar being the figure, the android meme, and he's going to come in and take on the android meme, just like he's going to get rid of Christianity by being an expert on what Christianity is, and particularly 68 hours in the Book of Revelations, plus the incredible workshop after it. He can only topple Christianity if you know it better than the Christians. And so he also acts out a better...
Nietzsche toppled Christianity. He did a pretty good job of demolishing
No, there's a lot of Christians running around still.
Oh, there's always going to be a lot of Christians running around.
No, there's not always going to be Christians. That's the point.
No, but then it's up to each one of us to come into our own awakening. You can't impose that on someone. He'd have to impose it on people for it to eradicate.
He is. The gup's emptying, and it already pretty well empty because the gup showed up as a voice to speak to us on March 18th and to interact with the fusion of heaven and earth.
Yeah, and it's like Pandora's box, and we've opened Pandora's box and by non-physical telling us that it doesn't create, and then for those humans that have gone along and allowed like a symbiotic relationship with non-physical as a result of that, and then it creeps in and steps a little bit further and goes, oh, by the way, thanks, we can create now.
Yeah,
and
very subtle game playing. And in that we are eternal. There's nothing new under the sun, so,
There's a lot to come. Yeah. We're eternal, man. There's lots of new to come.
So are we going to be known as the people in the future, like in future times, people look back and say, those fuckers are the guys that opened the lid on the Pandora's box?
Yep. Mm-hmm. It might just be called Bob, but Bob will be a collective figure containing you guys.
Yeah. But, no, anyways, I just want to backpedal a couple of paragraphs.
Yeah, let's go back to Zappa. Let's go back. We should get back to Zappa. I mean, we've covered, this is all useful.
No, I was bringing it back. I'm bringing it back by looking at this paradigm shift in contrast to what we know now, thanks to Ion. And that is the nature of that figure ground experience or relationship. And it's definitely changed now because not only is Ion working with the frustrated environments to outdo it, but also there's a doubleness there where that doesn't apply the way it used to, and Ion can actually, the veil is sort of thin between what's figure and what's ground, right?
That's right. It's important to know that McLuhan said that there's no difference between figure and ground once you get into the electric age. When you write a book...
the actual realization of that statement.
Yes. The figure. Now, McLuhan did a tetrad. Now, listen to this. He did a tetrad on the law of etherealization, which was, I think, Bucky Fuller's term for more and more getting done by less and less. Okay? That'd be homeopathic, whatever. The law of etherealization was one of the first tetrads McLuhan presented when he handed out pamphlets in 74, 75. And in it says, when figure, I think the reversal of it was, when figure becomes ground, it's a monster. And so figure and ground have homeopathically merged in many monstrous environments, each one of them a quadrant on my chart, which then overlays with the Book of Revelations monsters. You got the figure without ground. Figure and ground merger is the important percept. When you write about it, You go back to the visual categorization and splitting. You then talk about figure and ground. But Joyce showed figure and ground and then merged it and made it unreadable. So how do you show figure being merged with ground via a book situation? You've got to set up a fake figure and a fake ground and then merge them. And you'll see that McLuhan does that all the time. So figure merging with ground is exactly what it means heaven becomes earth, earth becomes heaven, right?
It's like the language is figure and ground, and when that gets obsolete.
Yeah, you split into mortar and word, and then they merge into a new system.
Exactly.
Right.
And so words retreat.
So, yeah.